to go to Havre as a child. Well, then every few years I would go out with them, like together a slideshow, going back in time, from 2015 going backwards to 1965. Now we'll go back to 1990. Now this is before the BNSF merger, so we'll see what that looked like. And this is before Amtrak got the P40s and P42s. These are F40s, which were originally designed to be for short trains, like going 400 or 500 miles. But as we'll talk about, because the Amtrak was counting on the SDP40Fs to take care of the long stuff. Well, they had trouble with that, as we'll talk about. But this is what the Empire Builder looked like going west in 1990. And they did have the superliners because those came in the 80s. They're pretty shiny. Now this is west of town. I used to walk out to a bluff, right? That's the Milk River. And this is between Havre and Pacific Junction, where the track went down to Great Falls. But this is west of town, and it is double track out to that Pacific Junction. So here's Amtrak in 1990 stopping at the depot, coming into the depot. And I don't know what kind of car that is. Is that an Alfa Romeo?
It looks like, yeah, I think that's I could tell the emblem that looks like Alfa.
Interesting. I wonder how they get parts in Montana for an Alfa Romeo.
Yeah, good luck with that. Tough enough to get parts here.
Big day at the, people getting on the train. It's always a big deal. Yeah, you can see how many people there are. And of course all the smokers get off too. So they're sitting there smoking, although it's not good right next to the Oxy settlement torch to be smoking a cigarette. But in 1990, there was still a lot of Great Northern Pacific cars running around, so you can see them all over the place. Here's a guy going back to the shop. Now this is out west of town. Now they go west for a ways along the river, and then they have to go up on the bluff and so they have to climb a grade. And this is SD40 and SD45, SD45. That was in 1990. That was pretty typical. Here comes the freight with
SD45 on that one.
Yeah. And this is a westbound with a SD45, SD40, and an F45, and then a couple of Jeeps that are going to drop off at a town someplace. They decided, okay, we're going to lease we're going to sort of wet lease like they do in the airline industry, wet lease some 100 units from Electromotive. And those are SD60s, standard SD60s, but they released and Electromotive did the maintenance. And then they did the same thing with GE. They got 100 B40s, B39-8s, I guess.
Those engines are now on a CN.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Now this is speaking of 4-axle power, this is a GP50, and it's in what the modelers call the toy train scheme, because long before the GP50s were painted like this, American train and toy painted their BN units like this. So
really,
yeah. So you'll see them at the time they looked really strange, but they
what they call life imitating art.
Yeah, that's right. Now I'll go back to 1975. SDP40Fs.
Right.
Those had come in the mid-70s, and for a while they did okay. But we'll talk about the problems they had with them. It's basically an SD40-2 inside a car body. And so here's a pair of them in the original Amtrak scheme, and then the second Amtrak scheme. And what they do is they would bring, at that time, they did the same thing they did with the F units. They would bring them into town, and then they would take the power off and put a fresh set on. And then they take these back to the shop and just, do minor maintenance on them. And then they would send them out the next day. So these units here will go to Seattle. They'll turn and go all the way back to Chicago, and then come back here and then be switched out.
Huh.
And so because they for the Empire Builder, they stationed them in Havre.
Okay.
And here's Amtrak's coming in, and they're obviously loading the diner and everything else. Meanwhile, Hot Freight has come in, and they're getting fueled on the passing track with SD40s. SD40-2 was the queen of the rails in the 80s.
Yeah, for a long time.
Yeah. So here's the power that's going to go back on the units. So here's a gentleman or a lady just came back on the train, seeing her husband, and an Amtrak employee there helping people on and off. Back then it was heritage equipment, because this is before the superliners, and they actually still washed the windows, if you can imagine. That's what you call a good service. The nice clean windows on the domes and they clean everything. So here's the second paint scheme with an SDP40F. Oh, and there's your favorite, Craig. GP30 and a GP35 coming in on a local, obviously switching
Some of those
elevators.
30s are still running.
Yeah, isn't that something?
Yeah.
They are. That was quite a unit.
Re-engined.
And so here's what the train looked like in the 80s. SDP40Fs and heritage equipment.
Including a full-length dome out there.
Yeah, full-length dome. So it was basically a lot of stuff from the Great Northern and NP. And they have these I don't know who had these single door baggage cars, but I've never seen them otherwise. But Amtrak had these. Maybe they cut those down from a full-length one. So here's the diesel shop, and F45s, and these are the SDP40Fs, and then SD45s and F45s. And these are the old switchers. These are NW2s, which came right after the war. So they're 35 years old, and they sold them because they hauled them east and sold them. But they were good engines, but they didn't need as many switchers, and they replaced them with the SW1500s. This is a U33C.
Sure is.
And an SDP45. It was a Great Northern passenger unit, but the BN did not sell those to Amtrak. So this is the Pacific Zip, which I think it was number 3, but anyway, it's all trailers, mostly mail, and it was pretty hot freight. So they'd get fueled and they were off again. There's a guy enjoying a cigarette, and I suppose it's probably behind the engines and stuff, probably not too bad, and behind the tires. But this thing moved right along, so I don't know. He's enjoying the ride, sitting under a Penn Central Flexivan. Now there's an interesting. And cabooses were still
a lot of that in Mexico years ago. Guys riding underneath trailers on flat cars.
Yeah. That's a good place. It's easy. It's accessible. Lots of air. Now these SDP40Fs are almost brand new. Yeah. And we'll talk about the problem with them. It's a SDP40 or SD40-2, and they put a car body on it. That's not the problem. But then they put these 2 great big heavy steam generators back there, and boilers. And the problem was that they didn't adjust the dynamics. And this truck here, they believe, this extra weight pushed down on the 6th axle, the last axle of the unit, and it unloaded this front axle. And so when they would go around a curve at speed, this thing started to climb the rails, and they would derail.
Yeah.
And so they had a couple derailments, and then the Santa Fe said they banned them. And then of course the Amtrak had to basically fortunately they'd been buying the F40s, and the F40s, so they replaced these things with F40s, and then they bought some more, and the F40s did yeoman service. Boy, they were really good. because they had a bunch of these things and they had to sell them all. Now
Yeah,
this
and
is west of
they wound
town.
up buying a bunch of them.
Yeah, but they took the boilers out.
Sure, they took the boilers out. Yeah,
Sure, then they were fine.
yeah.
Now this
Sure.
is west of town. I'm standing up on that bluff above the rattlesnake, the nest that I didn't know about, or rattlesnake nests. But the track goes out of town, and then it comes down here, and it keeps going straight off to the left down to Great Falls, Helena, and Butte. And Jim Hill had done that intentionally because he always wanted the line profitable, and so he built all these branch lines. So he made when they would finish the section of track, it would be in service right away, and he got a deal to haul ore, copper ore from the big open pit mine in Butte to a big smelter in Helena. And then he also got to haul the copper out of and the materials in and out of the smelter. And so this line, this was the main line. It just continued on. And then in this one book, they said at some point they decided, well, they better build a branch line to Seattle. And that's this line here. They built that sometime later, a branch line to Seattle. And so of course that's the main line heading out. And this is the view from the top of the bluff, train coming in. And there's the Milk River. It's definitely a mature river, kind of meandering around. And here's a typical freight, a couple SD45s and cars. A little bit of smoke as they've been sitting there getting fueled and stuff. Here's another train with a SD45, a U33, and an SD45. But here you can see the train. They run double track to here, and then the train goes off. The line goes off to Great Falls. They had a big engine shop down in for major maintenance down in Great Falls as well. But a lot of boxcars in the 70s. It was surprising that they
Yeah, I was looking at that.
Yeah,
I mean, we're so used to looking at something else in this area.
Yeah,
And they're all railroad owned as well.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was a big change that came in when other companies started. Here's Amtrak coming in. Now this is 4F units, and then a variety of Northern Pacific, Great Northern, Burlington, even some UP, Santa Fe cars, all sorts of different. So it was the typical circus train, and I was thinking about this, and because they always used to run 4 units in the summer, and they only added a couple of cars, but then I realized, of course, in the summertime, all these cars have pulleys going to the wheel that run the generators, and the big thing are the air conditioners. So they really needed an extra unit to power the air conditioners.
I see, sure.
Yeah, and that's why they always had 4 units, and the NP did the same thing. Even though the trains weren't that much longer, but when it got hot, you run all these air conditioners, and they would run it at night. It would get cold in those cars when they got out on the road. Boy, the air conditioners did work. And so, but you can see F units, and those are all F units from and some are still BN, some are being sold to Amtrak. You know, there was a whole collection of stuff because this is only a few years after Amtrak came in. But it's but you can, this is kind of a good picture. It shows Havre double track, and then the yard is here on the west end, and the yard goes all the way down there, and the depot is over here right by the elevator, and then the diesel shop is right over there. So you kind of get a picture of what the whole town looks like. It's about 10,000 people. So here's a brand new SDP 40F, and again, here's the boilers back here, and you can see how this would put extra weight on that last axle, and that unloads this axle, which is a problem. But back then they were trying all sorts of, this is still only a few years after the merger, they would sometimes run E units from Chicago to Havre and then turn them and run back.
Okay.
So they were doing all sorts of different things, but that's obviously Burlington. And here's some old F units. Here's the Burlington version of the merger scheme.
The green scheme, yeah.
The Burlington and the NP agreed on the Cascade green, but the Burlington had this kind of V shape in the nose with white, and then they had a big white stripe down the side, which didn't look very good. That didn't succeed. The Great Northern had pushed the blue, but that didn't look very good dirty either. The Cascade green does not look too bad when it gets dirty. It looks really nice, clean, but you see with the dirt, the blue doesn't do well at all. And
That's
so that's why this is a,
40, only 20 of them ever built.
yeah,
Only
isn't that something?
Oh, yeah.
Only 6 in the US.
Yeah. Yeah, they put them right into freight service right away. Here comes an F unit in with, or an E unit with some F units
Yeah.
on the builder. East of town. This is east of town. Here's this Burlington scheme. It's a big, wide white stripe, and then it kind of went along the unit and then went down. They called it the hockey
Hockey
stick.
stick, yeah.
Yeah. And then here's a brand new set of Pullman standard 55-foot covered hoppers that were delivered, because of course getting close to green season. We were out there in August and starting to harvest. Here's the Amtrak coming in still. They have the SDP 40Fs, but they're still running Heritage equipment. Some of it in Great Northern, some in NP, some of it painted Amtrak. It was really like a circus train. They're gonna put F units on it. And here's the freight leaving. This is from the bridge going north of town. And here's Amtrak leaving. They've taken the Herald off, and they're starting to look pretty scruffy. Spraying for mosquitoes, like Carl would say.
Yeah.
Now, this is the only time I ever saw 4 F units in,
Wow.
in Amtrak paint. They obviously just had been repainted somewhere.
Wow.
But
That's ABBA.
yeah, ABBA.